Inflationary data out, supportive of Fed cuts. Google a monopoly, still companies under pressure. We're going to bring you all the news and tackle today. Mark, Matt, Justice Brothers bringing it to you. Matt, that CPI data came out. Market's a little bit mixed today. Tech seems to be weighed by the Google news that we'll cover here in a second more than anything, but kind of just taking the morning off so far.
Yeah, a little bit taking the morning off, but that's after a pretty aggressive move back up to the top side over the course of the last week and a half, after the carry trade out of the Japanese started unwinding, following them raising some interest rates. And basically what you did is you achieved a gap fill from that moment. And so the gap down, which caused a lot of craziness, a lot of opinions all over social media about the end of the world. Well, a week and a half later, the end of the world has been filled, as that did fill the gap. But now the issue is, and what we've been talking about in the Traders Lounge at Tackle Trading, is now the real action starts as the gap does get filled. That was expected. Now we see patterns get developed here that are going to be really, really, really important. When you're looking at the current trend line of resistance, you can kind of look at kind of convergence right around that 544, 543 level, right where the 50-period moving average is on the daily chart. Looking at the S&P 500, you come out to a weekly chart here, and that's kind of where you're talking about a little bit of a confirmation above the 9 EMA as well. And so you've seen a really good price movement back to the top side, but now the real action begins as we fully expect pattern development to occur here.
Yeah, absolutely. And that CPI report, as it comes out today, the overall numbers, Matt, were a little bit of a inline expectations, no huge surprises. And so if you just look at the headline numbers here, came in as expected, 0.02 on the core, 0.02 month over month on the headline number. The headline 2.9%, down a little bit from 3%. So not a lot of fireworks, but the bigger story here, and we're going to cover this in our Jackson Hole preview in the Trading Justice podcast this weekend. The bigger story for me here is that it's supportive of Fed cuts if they want to do them, right? No surprises to the upside, continuing moderation to the downside. So if the Fed wants to cut, inflationary data today in the PPI report and for several months has been supportive of cooling inflation. Is that your general take on it as well?
Yeah, I think that's the important thing here is the conversation is really about September, and the CPI report followed by the PPI report cooling off yesterday does give the Fed the ammunition that they were looking for from an inflationary perspective to really kind of justify that cutting cycle. And when you are looking at the CPI report, 90% of the bump up was due to shelter. And when it comes to interest rates in the shelter index, cutting interest rates might not be the worst thing for shelter inflation, given the fact that cutting interest rates would most likely see a fairly big supply shock happening over the course of the next little bit, which would actually alleviate inflation on shelter itself. That wouldn't work with anything else in the CPI report, but shelter itself is a little bit of a weird one when it comes to interest rates. And so I do think it was the data that the Fed was looking for, and I do think that solidifies the cut in September.
Yeah, I think it is absolutely supportive. And we will be previewing Jackson Hole in the Trading Justice podcast. No shortage of interesting stories today, Matt. The Google story, though, certainly takes the headline with the Justice Department talking breakup. I mean, that is a massive just headline. What do you got for us today in Stocks in the News?
Yeah, it certainly was, and Google takes the top slot there with that news coming out yesterday regarding U.S. regulators that are looking to maybe break up the tech giant. I just want to say I'm a little bit dubious on the ability of the United States government to break up the tech giant of Google. I'm also a little bit dubious on the importance of breaking up the tech giants right now, as it is, in my estimation, we're going to go through one of the most important technological build outs in the history of mankind, and we certainly want our tech leadership in competition against some other nation states out there. And so I think it's a good debate, and I think it's a justifiable debate. I just want to say that I'm a little bit dubious on the ability of U.S. regulators to pull that off. Now we'll see what that transpires. I also think the market is telling us a little bit that they're a little bit hesitant there as well. Google down, obviously down about 3% on the news here today, but it hasn't really done anything in terms of pattern development and hasn't done anything in terms of changing of the trend. If you were to tell me that a stock is going to start slowing momentum in a bearish downtrend at the 9 EMA, I would say the next day should be a downward movement in price. And so I'm not too surprised Google's down on the day from a technical perspective. Obviously, this is adding a little bit of fuel to that fire. Second stock story, Kellanova jumped 6% as Mars agreed to acquire the food maker. And so Kellanova gets bought out by Mars, the massive candy company Mars, and that blows up a really good trade that we were looking at. And that's the only thing I wanted to complain here today. Kellanova was going to make the report this week because it is a beautiful high base following an awesome earnings report. Kellanova gets bought out. That kind of blows up that trade, but that's just a little bit of a complaint. And then, Mark, as you noted earlier today, as we were talking, still companies in the U.S. under some pressure. Still Dynamics, Nucor under a little bit more pressure than U.S. still, but they're down as China starts warning a little bit of the current still conditions are worse than past financial crises. I don't know if they're talking specifically about China and the fake cities they're not going to be building any longer, or here in the U.S., but regardless, still companies under a little bit of pressure.
They were referring to their fake cities. They didn't say fake cities, but it was a pretty dire situation.
Cities.
You are allowed to. You're allowed to. If you build buildings and nobody lives in them, they're fake cities. Listen, as we look over,
and if you build a whole bunch of collection of buildings together, we call that a city. So
so it's some interesting news, and just a little preview. We got Walmart earnings tomorrow morning. That's going to be one of the more important events of the week, and so we will certainly be covering that. Seeing mixed reaction in commodities, not a lot of excitement outside of those still companies in commodity movement itself. Let's just fire through the charts.
Yeah, gold just hovering that around that 2,500 breakout zone. Might take a little bit of time to digest that, but again, it's something you got to be paying attention to, as we discussed yesterday, as that breakout of 2,500 would be the all-time breakout there. And then the combination of silver versus gold, and the not silver versus gold, but silver versus copper, and which one are we going to get a reversal on? Silver, a little bit of a bearish retracement with slowing momentum in trend. I would expect a double bottom here, and that's where we would start talking about potential reversal analysis. On the copper side of the equation, a little bit of a head and shoulders early look here with some slowing momentum and trend, but not there, not ready for prime time yet, silver or copper is. And so gold 2,500, silver and copper on reversal radar, but still in the early developments of reversal out of the two commodities outside of gold.
Yeah, listen, we have a fantastic community, Traders Lounge. We extend these conversations. We take a look at technicals. We're going to take a look at in depth on technicals on Google today, on those still companies, break down it up, talk about the stories. It is a fantastic feature in our pro membership. Sign up for a trial, go to tackletrading.com, sign up for a 15-day trial, see what this fantastic community is all about.